I titled today's Neville Goddard conversation mind map, Prosperity Reconciliation. So this is what's happening on the journey within ourselves as we bring forth our vision. We're reconciling divergent viewpoints and convergent viewpoints. So divergent could be looked at as seeing things from many different perspectives, recognizing that there is infinite potentiality. Convergent is relating the potentiality on the journey to bringing forth your vision. Now, Neville Goddard says it really well when he says, man is only limited by weakness of attention and poverty of imagination. So divergent thinking is oftentimes looked at as creative thinking. Convergent thinking a lot of times is looked at as keeping your attention on specific elements on the journey to realizing your vision, what is relevant and in harmony. This internal reconciliation can be related to what he says next, when he says, the great secret is a controlled and well-sustained attention, firmly and repeatedly focus on the objects to be accomplished. Now I want to relate this over to a story. A number of years ago, I went out for coffee with one of my friends, and he mentions to me a story of one of his friends who started a business, and within the first week, he generated $15,000 worth of sales. Much of it was net, and it was selling a large quantity of product, which for many entrepreneurs, and he had mentioned as well, that his friend didn't have a business background, didn't even have a sales background. For many entrepreneurs, they might consider this to be a far stretch, that this was a possibility. And I tend to have a fascination for people who do things differently, so I really wanted to know what he did. And I wanted to know this at a psychological level. Because as we're realizing, it's the psychology, it's the way we look at things, the way we interpret things that is bringing forth our day-to-day journey to the vision. And what we want is to reconcile with our vision, create a flow-based journey, and do it in an ideal, harmonious way. So through our conversation, I recognized that his friend had released a lot from shame in regards to entrepreneurship and sales. What we find on this journey is that as we remove the shame surrounding the deservedness in relation to our vision, we automatically do the things that are ideal. We automatically find ourselves understanding how the different aspects of the journey, the information that's presented to us, the five sensory experience, relates somehow to bringing forth our vision. For example, he was able to, through the process of releasing from shame, find the accurate marketing methodology, selling process, and he didn't have any experience, product and service, because his desire was to build a business, and he was able to do it rapidly. I'm noticing this more so, a parallel between releasing from shame and the speed in which someone brings forth their vision. And upon deeper reflection and working with the Neville Goddard information, we recognize that what this individual is doing, what people are doing, who are able to bring forth the vision in a flow-based way, is they're able to maintain their attention on, keep their attention on, and see the relatability within themselves and reconcile within themselves all the different information and viewpoints that exist. Look around today more so than ever before. We have a lot of different information, a lot of different ways of doing things. However, what we want to do is we want to go deep within ourselves and build a relationship with our intuition and our inner voice so we can find the true, distinct pathway to realizing our vision. And so if a person has released from shame, what we recognize is they learn to trust themselves, listen to themselves. They seem to have developed a high degree of relatability to and understanding of their inner voice and intuition. Thus, we want to make this a priority, because that's when we see the connections between divergent and convergent thinking to a higher degree. So again, divergent, seeing things from many different perspectives, and convergent, connecting the dots in relation to a goal, in relation to a vision. Shame seems to create confusion between the two. A person might not feel that they're good enough. Others will accept them. Shouldn't have what they desire. As a result, they're afraid to do the things that they know they have to do to produce the results. They experience perhaps a higher degree of procrastination, stagnation, even though the answers are within them. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to engage with our vision. We want to become one with it. He calls this the feeling of the wish fulfilled, which is essentially imagining or inner dialoguing in a way that would imply that you already are the person that you see in the end. He says the best way to do this is to concentrate your attention upon the idea of identifying yourself with your ideal, seeing yourself at the end, recognizing that you are that person now. He says, assume you are already that which you seek, and your assumption, though false, if sustained, will harden into fact. So, if sustained, will harden into fact. So what we want to do is sustain it. Now, to help us sustain it and to release from shame-based interpretations, if those exist, in relation to prosperity, we want to understand this important quote here that he also shared with us. He says, if a physical fact can produce a psychological state can produce a physical fact. So what this means is that just as we placed ourselves in a certain state of mind in which we feel one with the vision at that moment, if for some reason we were not able to sustain it till it hardens into fact, then we seem to have interpreted a physical fact in a way that brings us into a different psychological state, one of shame, which then plays out as convoluted behaviors, a disconnect between the convergent and divergent thinking, again, valuing the infinite potentiality as well as automatically identifying with the accurate thinking in harmony with the vision. And this was the key that my friend shared with me, because one of the things that I love to do, whenever someone shares with me a story about somebody that was able to bring forward success rapidly or from a place of flow, or when I'm in conversation with individuals who do that, is I want to understand their psychology. And one of the things that we find is they have released to a really high degree from shame in regards to prosperity. Now, to help us with this, we want to value our journey. So you've committed to the prosperity. We want to value our journey, and if shame exists, we want to start committing to ourselves that we are going to exclude it out of consciousness. That way we feel more one with the vision, with that end. And we play out the accurate theater in harmony with the vision, the ideal things play out, the ideal bridge of incidents. And perhaps this model, which I'm not going to get too much into detail in, it's a persuasion model, the Hovland-Yale model, can help us work with this. Every day on our day-to-day journey to realizing our vision, we have different experiences. We relate with others. We relate with information. We relate with different experiences in life. And we interpret these based on our self-image. If a person has a self-image riddled with shame, they might find themselves identifying with an excessive amount of thinking, which we call overthinking, which then leads to weakness of attention. They feel overwhelmed. And what we want to do is find this shame-based programming within ourselves and change it, either by doing some kind of subconscious mind work, engaging in some self-talk, perhaps working with somebody, so we can release from, a lot of times, deeply rooted shame-based programming. And the fundamental reason why is because we want to reconcile within ourselves. We want to make peace within ourselves. Because as we make peace within ourselves, the outer world and the relationship to the inner world makes even more sense. This is developing an internal relationship with yourself. So this model has three parts: source, message, and audience. In relation to source, we can say we get information. So books, videos, conversations with people, five sensory data. There's messages contained within. And we are the recipients of that information. So we're the audience. What we want to recognize is that any information that's presented to us, if it seems to bring forth shame-based reactivity or thinking about ourselves in relation to our vision, then we have an opportunity to change that thinking. Now, what I've found is that there's fundamentally two ways of changing the thinking, although they seem to have relationships with each other. Number one is to make flow a priority, to step into the feeling of the wish fulfilled and maintain it. What happens is shame gets automatically excluded out of consciousness. Another way to do this is to identify what we are reacting to, thus changing our psychological state on the journey, change our internal meaning and relationships symbolically, the symbolic meaning in regards to that aspect, knowing that we are the ones assigning meaning from within, and aligned with an accurate meaning that's in harmony with the vision, such as, I do deserve to bring forth the prosperity. More so every day I realize that I am deserved. I appreciate myself. I appreciate the prosperity that I am. And so what generally tends to happen is we integrate both. We work with both. We continue to place ourselves in an environment and do the things, maintain a flow that automatically reconciles within ourselves certain thinking in regards to shame, automatically so. And number two is, if it's persistent, we find that meaning and we change that meaning. That's why it's important, and I discussed this in the last video, to note these things down. And at the end of the day, review what you are interpreting about the different aspects of the journey in relation to shame. I always recommend releasing from these interpretations, because then you're going to have a lot more of a flow-based journey to the destination. For me, it was a combination of working with both of those areas to release from shame. But what this individual did was, for a period of time, he saturated his mind with information, audios, books, and individuals that were constantly encouraging him to do the things that he knows he has to do from a place of love and peace. And so he became like that. This model can be looked at from a few perspectives. Number one is that we receive information and consider that to be the source. We receive a message, and if shame is mixed into that message, we might interpret the meaning of the message plus the shame. And audience is really how a person relates to that information. So generally what we see is individuals who have a good relationship with the internal divergent and convergent thinking is they evaluate the information that's presented to them and ask themselves, is it in harmony and in contribution to their vision? This happens on the journey, and this happens with the cause and effect reflections that we can do at the end of the day. During the day, as we note these things that show up that seem to reveal shame within ourselves based on our interpretation, at the end of the night, we can make peace with it. We can reconcile. We can say, is this really so? Is this information really true? Is what I'm assuming to be true, believing to be true, actually in harmony and in contribution with my vision and my first-class concept of self? And if it is not, we can change it. Change our relationship with it using the subconscious mind work, such as subconscious mind audio, self-talk, revision. And by working with these areas, what happens is we release from those interpretations. And we begin to accept ourselves more. And what you'll notice is the next day, you're having more ideas and you're moving forward with the true ideas, so you don't feel overwhelmed by information. Now, another reason why I want to discuss this is because we live in a world today where there's far more information available on the internet than ever before. And it's easy to access this information. And what we want to do is have this inner reconciliation occur within ourselves so we can connect back to our intuition and our inner voice. Create a nice harmony between the intuition and the accurate thinking. This will allow us to discern from the large volumes of complex information and relate it over to our vision to see what is relevant. And the information that is relevant and in harmony to our vision is another way of keeping our attention upon the idea, because that information encourages the idea. So again, going back to the beginning, when he says, man is only limited by weakness of attention, we recognize that perhaps shame can play a big role in weakening that attention. However, we have the power to release from that shame by changing the thinking in regards to the shame and releasing that, excluding that from our consciousness, seeing ourselves from the perspective of deservedness and one with the vision. And then he says poverty of imagination. The reality is this: we have the ability to, right now, imagine anything. What we're always going to imagine and commit to is what we truly desire. And then all we have to do is recognize that what we imagine and what we truly desire is one with us. It's already there within us. And then some way along the journey, as we discussed in the last Neville Goddard video, we will experience it in a flow-based way as a realization. And to make this journey as loving, flow-based, peaceful, and harmonious as possible, we want to maintain a strength, a lightheartedness of the attention. And we do this by displaying the true strength and lightheartedness within ourselves, by releasing from the heaviness of shame that creates unnecessary complexity, such as shaming ourselves, shaming others. In the entrepreneurial journey, a person who identifies with shame might experience a lot of shame in regards to how they relate with others, how they relate with their team, their vendors, their clients, their prospects, and so forth. All of this adds more steps, more layers. Overthinking within is expressed as overthinking without. So what we want is to embrace complexity in a harmonious way. And this is done by harmonizing the convergent and divergent thinking. So again, divergent thinking, seeing things from many different perspectives. Convergent thinking, connecting the relevant perspectives in relation to your vision. This, a lot of times, is done automatically by maintaining the feeling of the wish fulfilled and being in flow, making flow a priority. It happens automatically. And to complement this, I recommend identifying any programming that is within ourselves that is related to shame release that programming so that you can bring forth a flow-based, first-class-based journey to the destination. And this was the symbolic meaning Abdullah had shared with him during his conversations with him regarding Neville's plans going to Barbados. Neville wanted to go to Barbados, and he wanted to get there first class. He was, at a moment, going to settle for third class, but Abdullah helped him realize that he can get there first class by embodying the first class concept of self. And so he ended up getting to the destination in a flow-based way, first class way. He went to Barbados first class because he never settled. And also one of the great lessons that Abdullah had also mentioned to him is to never be ashamed of who you are. Accept yourself. The way you are is divine perfection now. And we have the ability to understand this more so every day by recognizing if our flow is broken. As we discussed in the last video, what are the flow breakers? A lot of times we find the flow breakers are the shame-based components, are the shame-based interpretation. So we release from it so we can bring forth the first-class concept of self. So as he states, man is only limited by weakness of attention and poverty of imagination. The great secret is a controlled and well-sustained attention, firmly and repeatedly focused on the objects to be accomplished. This is what we want to further understand. And this is what's going on within ourselves. I call this the internal reconciliation. And since we're speaking about this from the perspective of prosperity, I titled the mind map, Prosperity Reconciliation. What we're really doing is making peace with the conflict within ourselves. And one of the ways to make peace with this conflict within ourselves is go to the root of it and release it at a root level. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an affirmation. We can say, I realize that I am an embodiment of my first-class concept of self. As a result, I'm able to maintain a flow-based first-class journey to realizing my vision. Upon the journey, I'm able to accurately assess the source of information presented to me, recognizing that I'm the source of interpretation within myself. And the message contained within the five sensory data is accurately interpreted within myself as the source and interpreter of that information. Through the process, I reconcile my ability to understand the many different perspectives, the many different nuances, and I'm able to find and connect the dots harmoniously to bring forth my vision from the ideal perspective of love. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.